Well, hey everybody. I was asked yesterday to help develop a player prop organizational sheet for NBA. And even though I'm not betting anymore, we're at day 2 of not betting. Successfully did not bet on any games yesterday. I don't want to be one of those guys who keeps pulling out like a sobriety pin talking about how long it's been since I've wagered on sports, but I'm successfully not betting anymore. So uh, that's good, but I can still help you out and explain how these algorithms work. So let's talk about how you would develop a player prop sheet for NBA. If you have a copy of the NBA algorithm, which you cannot even buy on my website anymore, you just kind of have to have one from previous periods of time. You can look inside the player sheet here, the player stats sheet, and you're going to want to create a pivot table with all this data. So we're going to highlight all these different columns all the way over to F points, which I guess is fantasy points. And then we're going to go all the way down, Control Shift and hold the down arrow all the way down to the 1,048,000 row, which is all the way to the bottom of the Excel sheet. So that whenever we add new player stats in here, it's going to include all this data. We're going to insert a pivot table. That's what we're doing. We're going to put it in a new worksheet, creating a pivot table off of all of this data. And what we're going to be looking at is we're going to then structure this pivot table to help us out and to get us information about each player, and then take a look at Prize Picks to see what Prize Picks has for certain points, rebounds, assists, and things that they offer here for NBA, and see if there's any value anywhere. Because that's the way that I would do this. I still recommend Prize Picks. I'm not betting at all, which includes Prize Picks, but I do recommend Prize Picks rather than just regular wagering. I find it was more fun, and I enjoyed using Prize Picks more than just wagering straight on games. So that's why I felt, I'm okay with answering questions about player props here. So as we go back to the table that we were creating here, well, what do we want to look at? We want to look at teams. So we grab this stream team and put this in the row labels. When we do that, you're going to see all the different teams. We want a player name. Okay, now we have all the players that are popping up here. We don't need to see grid lines. I always like to get rid of grid lines in the background. We don't need them. So we've got team, we've got player. Let's also grab injury status just to make sure that we don't include any injuries. There's out players and there's playing players. All right. So it's nice to see an injury status. And oftentimes what that injury is, you can see that as well. I'm going to move injury below player name. All right. So you've got names, we've got injury status, we've got teams. Now let's grab just points. We'll work with just points for this video, but you can use any one of these categories here. We're grabbing points and we're putting it in the values quadrant here. And it's wanting to sum up the points. And I would actually, instead of making it sum, I would go value field settings. And you want to summarize this by average and not sum. And I mean, you could do either way, but average is just a little bit more helpful for what we're doing here. So average points, and you can also do a number format here so that the number is to 2 decimals, or we'll call it 1 decimal point. And now you're seeing the average number of points per game for all of these players. So let's shrink them down. You can expand and collapse different areas of the pivot table by right-clicking on them, and then you get these options of expanding or collapsing the entire area to make it easier to look at. So, for example, we've got a list of players, teams, names, and points now coming off of this data. I like to add color to this. And the way to add color is to use something called conditional formatting. So we're clicking on, a number of points for any given player, and we go to conditional formatting, and I like to use this color scale. And the first color scale, where green is on top and red is on the bottom, is going to give you higher numbers are going to be a shade of green, lower numbers are going to be a shade of red, and it's going to be yellow if the number's kind of in the middle of whatever range we have of all the numbers. And in order to apply that conditional formatting to everything in this points column, every player, what you do is you go back to conditional formatting and you go to manage rules and you edit the rule that we just created here. And all cells showing average points of values for player, this one. This one's going to colorize everything that's related to, after you press apply, it's going to relate to every single player's point total here. And another thing we can do is we can sort everything descending by average points. By player. Let's do this by player. By player, more sort options, descending by average points. Okay, now we're starting to get something. Now what we're seeing is that on the Atlanta Hawks, Trae Young is by far, of all the players that are supposedly playing today, Trae Young is going to score the most points most likely by 6, right? Like he's set 6 points more than DeJounte Murray, right? Bogdanovich. I mean, boy, really? Can we get more creative with the names here? Son of Bogdan, definitely, right? DeAndre Hunter. So you start to see the numbers here that are showing up for each player. Now, you can do the same thing. We're going to do it really fast with something like rebounds. Sum of rebounds, but if you right click here, you can summarize values by average rebounds, go to conditional formatting, put the format here, then you manage that rule that we just created, edit rule, apply to all player, apply, number format here is now number with 1 decimal point. Voila. So now you've got rebounds, right? So we got points, we got rebounds. We could do that with assists or anything else we wanted to add, right? And you can really start adjusting this pivot table any way you like. Now, how do you use this information, right? Well, what you've got is you've got a list of things that are offered for different players. And the first thing that I would do is I would go into the actual projections for the day for NBA. And I did quickly update this, but it's not even fully updated, but I did update a little bit. Look at today, the 29th, and we can see some things about who's favored, right? It's got teams like the Magic up here, heavily favored against the Wizards, right? So when it comes to scoring points, something like the Magic, it has them putting up 124 points, right? So let's look through the Magic in here. And what we can do is you can create slicers to make this easier to look for. Stream team, we just created, insert a slicer for team. We're going to highlight the Orlando Magic. So what we have is we have some players that are injured and we have some players that are playing. Pablo, Franz, Cole Anthony, Moritz Wagner, Jalen Suggs. We've got some numbers here. Well, what are those players offered as we look through draft? I'm looking for Orlando players. Here we go. Wagner, Banchero, Paolo. 22 points for Paolo, 22 points for Franz. Well, that's more than are listed here. See, and why is that? The odds makers are thinking the exact same thing that I was, which is that Orlando puts up more points than normal because they're playing a team like Washington. So the points for these players is inflated over their average, right? And so there really isn't a lot of value here. We think these players could go over this number, but unfortunately, Prize Picks has that number higher. Suggs, 12.5. Gaga Bitat, boy, they got some crazy names in Orlando. Goga, no, not Gaga, Goga. Jalen Suggs, 12.5. Is there any value here at all? Jalen Suggs is close, right? Goga makes 7 points normally, and they've got him at 9, right? So there's like no value here. It's really, really tough. Makes you want to dig through. It's one reason why I'm not betting anymore. There's no value in the marketplace anymore. AI is taking care of all this. Everyone has access to all the same stats. It's impossible. You could look at some of these games where you've got some more injuries and stuff like that, but this is basically how you do it. So I wanted to show you how you create the pivot table and how you can make this easier to look through. Here's a game time decision. But, you know, for those that asked, I decided I would do it, even though I'm not betting anymore. And I'm happy not to be betting anymore. So that's how you do it. That's how you set up a pivot table off of player stats in NBA. So if you have a copy of the file, you can follow those instructions and you can do it yourself. And if you do want to purchase any copies of these algorithms, you can contact me on my website, even though I do not have the products listed anymore. But I will respond to you and give you a price and let you know. All right. So good luck, everybody. May all your player props and picks be winning. And certainly learning about pivot tables is really helpful because you can use pivot tables to organize all types of data. And you can see how they certainly can become readily available to view visually and to kind of, you know, get some information intelligence. Like Clint Capella, when it comes to rebounds, this guy seems to be rebounding the most on Atlanta. So if Atlanta's playing tonight and he's an option for rebounds, that's something you could consider. Are they playing tonight? Are they playing tonight? Atlanta, I do not see Atlanta. Atlanta's not playing tonight. Yeah, there's not a lot to go on here. Houston playing against the really injured Denver Nuggets. Like, you know, what would you do in this situation? I don't know, everybody. I don't give betting advice anymore other than not to bet. Alperen Sengun, when you look at the players for Houston, comes to points, probably gonna be down at the bottom, right? You can see that. Here we go. Dylan Brooks, Fred Van Vliet. Boy, I really don't know my NBA players. There's Alperen Sengun, 20 points. The Joker's playing. Gabriel Smith, 12, 12, 15. Was there anything good on there? Van Fleet's doing 16 points a game. And they got him at 15-5. See how there's just really almost no value anywhere? Sengun 20. Yeah, everything's just kind of set at the average, which means that, you know, the odds makers are not really lazy, but they're just kind of going off the average points here, right? So if you don't have any better intelligence, you're just kind of flipping a coin here, and gambling becomes exactly what you think it would be, which is sometimes you win, sometimes you don't, but it's difficult to get a good line on anybody. Bonus. Yep. So anyway, that's how you set up the pivot table. Good luck. May all your picks be winning.